Happy Wednesday, wonderful people. Yeah, and thank you for joining us on another Scrimba live stream, a very exciting one, because I'm joined today by none other than Guil from Scrimba. Yeah, if you don't know, Guil is a developer and educator at Scrimba with 15 years of experience in the industry, no less. Very exciting. Fairly recently, we've been here a while now, started at Scrimba, building immersive courses and also leading the Scrimba Bootcamp, which we will be hearing a little bit more about today. And the purpose of this stream is to learn how to learn. Many people think I'm either good at learning or I'm not. And if I'm not, well, I'm stuck with it. No, not the case. There are many things you can do to improve your learning technique, which Guil here is going to share with us, including common pitfalls, improving your learning ability, asking for and making the most of feedback, even when it's negative, study organization, and note taking. And by the end of the stream, you'll have a whole host of information to 10x your learning. So looking forward to that. And as usual, we do these live, so you can ask any questions you may have. So do leave them in the chat. We'll do our best to get through as many as possible. But first, a huge warm welcome to Guil.
There it is. Yeah, thanks so much, Leanne. I appreciate the intro and happy to be here on the live stream first time. And yeah, I've been at Scrimba for about 4 months. So it's been really great getting to do a lot of these community events. And so excited to share some things about learning today. So let's kick it off when you're ready.
Absolutely, yeah. So you've seen many learners over the years. So I'm sure you'll have lots of invaluable advice to share with us. Let's kick off, I think, with, well, I've already kind of answered this, but I might be talking rubbish. What do you think? Can learning ability be improved?
I think for many, learning is a lifelong journey, and learning to learn itself is a skill. And like many skills and abilities, we can certainly improve our learning. It's not a fixed trait like intelligence isn't, for example. So I think once you've developed effective learning habits, many we might talk about today, you can totally use certain strategies to improve your ability to learn and increase your capacity to learn new information and to practice it and to retain it, and then even use that knowledge as a sort of basis for the next new skill you learn and maybe the more complex problem you try to solve. So I think it can definitely be improved.
Excellent. Have you come across in your time, because you've been a coding tutor for many years now, have you come across students that had a shaky start but later improved? And if so, how do you think they turned it around?
Yeah, absolutely. So coding is challenging. It's difficult, right, to get started learning. And, at first students might experience quick wins getting started, maybe following along with an instructor and just kind of watching the material. And, they're feeling really good. And then later when they kind of try to do something on their own, they struggle and nothing sort of works the way they expected it to, right? And that's when they maybe get a little bit discouraged and frustrated. I see students often tend to fall into that passive learning approach, right, versus an active learning approach. And passive learning is, as I mentioned, you're just watching or reading the material, and it's more of a one-way effort. And the more you continue to learn passively, you might fall into this sort of learning trap. But it's difficult to retain and important new complex information, especially when it comes to coding. So if you're taking that information in superficially at face value, right, by just watching a video or copying and pasting code, you're going to struggle to later put it all into practice or maybe do something meaningful with it. To kind of get back to your question, students who tend to think of learning as a more active and strategic activity, and they're more actively involved in it, they're going to be more successful in their learning process. And that's when it really starts to pay off, right? If they engage more with the learning material, take good notes, ask questions, test their assumptions, and challenge their assumptions, they're likely going to get a lot more out of it than just taking things in at face value by just watching a video or reading a blog post, for example.
Yeah, excellent. I hope that answers your question there, evil coder, about how you can improve your ability to learn. Learn by doing, it sounds like. Lovely. And Sol is wondering, how do you build mental resilience?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are certain techniques you can use when learning, and part of it is learning practicing to get better. So deliberate practice, right? So you come at your learning with maybe a set of goals that you want to accomplish, maybe a learning list, for example, and really you go at it and you approach it with the goal of getting better from learning session to learning session. And if you find that you do that and approach it in a strategic way, you're going to improve. You're going to find that things are sticking. You're improving at things that you might have been shaky with, previously. So yeah, come at it with a plan and take it seriously, and don't just expect to sit there and like I said just now, read a blog post or watch 1 hour's worth of videos and expect all of that to kind of sink in and be able to cement it and then apply it and retain it in the long run, because it usually doesn't happen that way. So be strategic in your learning.
I like that. Having a plan is something that people might not necessarily consider, but are you suggesting a solid kind of plan, like for example, a list of things you want to learn versus how many hours a day? Does it need to be that regimented? Is that helpful, or how would you approach it?
Yeah, I would say block off time, and we talk about this a lot even in the boot camp. Block off time, for example, on your calendar. It could be like you're learning a major topic, but it's probably best not to learn it all in one long session. It's better to maybe do smaller sessions spread out over a period of time. That's also going to help you give you breaks in between to kind of reflect on what you learn and process it and maybe even internalize it. And then when you get back to it, you even review what you previously learned and kind of get back into learning the next thing or the next bit about the big topic you're learning. So being strategic and blocking off time on your calendar that is for learning. And then also just being mindful of how long you are learning, or you don't want to cram and sit there for as I mentioned, hours on end, watching a 3-hour course on React and expecting everything to kind of stick, right? So just be mindful of that as well. You want to spread out your learning over a series of days or however long, depending on how long it is, or rather the topic you're learning.
Lovely. Yeah. Goran is making the point, I miss being in school when I can ask the teacher questions. It's just impossible online. I understand this predicament. Sometimes it can feel when you're learning to code that if you get stuck, maybe you have a little Google, you don't find the answer, then what? What's your advice for Goran's situation here?
So feedback. So this is related maybe to asking questions or even feedback in general. So often when students are, let's say, online learning asynchronously, they're not in school, for example, or they're part of a learning community. What I often see happen with students in particular is that they might be intimidated or they feel blocked by the process or the act of asking questions or even getting feedback, right? They either avoid it altogether or it comes in the form of some sort of vague, open-ended request or question. So when you ask for advice or feedback about something, especially if it's something you're completely new at or not quite comfortable with, you might feel a little vulnerable too, right? Maybe embarrassed because you might not want to sound silly or might not want someone to think your code is bad. But I think to get great advice and great feedback, you also need to learn how to ask for it. It's more of a two-way street. So taking a little bit of time to prepare your approach for how you request the feedback or asking the right questions is going to go a long way. So yeah, just being clear and specific and keeping the question or the request brief is going to help. And yeah, so you might be on Slack, for example, and want to reach out to an instructor or a student. You might not want to say, "Hey, I completed this project. What do you think? Can you review it?" Or drop like a 5-paragraph question that could overwhelm them. So you might just have clear prompts like, what did you like about this? What could be better? Or what approach would you use to solve this problem? Or do you think I'm headed in the right directions? In other words, like make it very well scoped, and that might elicit more constructive answers and feedback in return. If that helps.
Absolutely. And we have, who was it? Aaron is recommending Discord. Thank you for bringing this up. Here is our Discord in all of my light mode glory. Yes. If you don't know, Scrimba has this Discord server. You can have it on dark mode if you like, don't worry. And we have plenty of help channels available to you. And we even give some advice about how to ask a question which is likely to get yourself an answer, which is what Guil was just talking about there. So go and check that out. Lots of friendly people. We even have a pets channel, which you might like as well for those coffee breaks. There you go, some animals. And yes, plenty of people waiting there to help you out. So hopefully you will enjoy that. Brilliant. Thank you for that, Guil. Driplord is saying, write down what you learn so you don't forget. Now, I'm someone who I have to write everything down, otherwise, poof, it's gone. And I wanted to ask you about note-taking tips, because I feel when I was learning to code, well, I still am learning to code, but it seems a bit strange to write notes about code, or at least I felt that, because do you handwrite them? In which case, handwriting CSS just feels bizarre. Do you copy and paste them? Well, that kind of feels like cheating. Any tips on how you can write effective notes about coding?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, absolutely. Staying organized with notes, I think it's important. In the past, and I still do use, for example, Google Docs or tools like Notion to take notes about what I'm learning and keep them organized. But what always seems to work more effectively for me is also alongside Google Docs, for example, is just using my handy notebook. And what I do is whenever I'm learning something new, whether it's like watching a video or reading a book or a blog post, for example, I might be taking some short, sort of messy notes on the side at first. And the notes are mainly what I think the key learning objectives are, the big picture ideas. I might do that in Google Notes, for example. And, to speak to your question about like, do I copy the code? Or I might take snapshots, right, of a slide or a graphic or even a code snippet that I see and just add it to the doc, organize it later. But shortly after, in my handy notebook here, I then try to sort of recall as much information as I can and kind of write out what I learned in my own words. And when I do that, it helps me remember the key ideas, and I can even use those notes to review kind of what I learned when I go, my next sort of learning session. And when you do that, I think when you're writing down and explaining what you learned in your own words, it gives you an opportunity to kind of synthesize information, and it then it makes it so that it's knowledge that someone that you own, right? It's not just something someone else has told you, right? And even better, I think, if you can even use your notes to draw connections between new information and things you kind of already know, I think that's incredibly powerful, and it's going to deepen your understanding of what you're learning, at least in my experience.
Lovely, thank you. I hope that helps with some note-taking situations you may find yourself in. Now, Mark has a question here. Maybe a bit off topic, says Mark. I don't think it's off topic at all. I think it's a very good question. I struggle with perfectionism when I'm trying to go off-piste and build my own projects. So it sounds like Mark is doing what you suggest, which is building his own things, but then getting stuck on perfecting things. So there's a phrase, isn't there, that the first 80% takes 20% of the time, and the last 20% takes the rest of it. Yeah. How can Mark get out of this problem?
Yeah, Mark, I totally feel that. I remember those days when I was just trying to do everything to CSS pixel perfection. But yeah, and that's, you know, that's a good way to think about it. I don't necessarily think it's a problem, but like, yeah, I would suggest the minute you feel something and you're incredibly excited to share it and get feedback from colleagues or you know, really anyone, you just put it out there, share it with folks, and knowing that, yeah, you can always tweak it. It's an ongoing thing. It's going to evolve as the more you learn and the more feedback you get. So I think it'll do you a lot of good if you just put it out there, even if you're not feeling great about it or have all these questions remaining on how to approach it and complete it. And then by doing that, you're not only, you know, getting validation on the thing you build and feeling good and excited about it and gaining more momentum and confidence to keep going, but you might also be getting feedback on how to improve it, on where to go next, and other approaches to take. So yeah, get it out as soon as you start feeling good about it and ready to share, and just be, you know, open to feedback and things like that on how to improve it, right? It's that red green refactoring code. You take it from red to green, and then you worry about refactoring it later when everything sort of works and the way it looks the way you want it to.
That's it. And is anything, well, at least in terms of apps or software, ever truly finished? I mean, they're
Right.
always pushing new updates to YouTube and Twitter and whatnot. And even if you
Yeah.
got it completely perfect, at some point, there's going to be new technology coming along and you'd be adding new stuff or maybe new requests from the end user. So I think this perfect end result is a bit of a myth, maybe.
For sure. It's that ship early, ship often idea.
Yeah, that's right. Hope that helps you out, Mark. There's a little discussion going on in the chat. Started off with Samrat saying, I'm 21 and I feel like I have started learning to code very late. I'm saying this because my friends already have 1.5 years of experience in coding. What should I do? Now, Alex from Scrimba, shout out, says 21 is far from late. Just interviewed someone on the Scrimba podcast who's starting at 49. And several people in agreement that Martin says, age is just an integer. It's all about thirst for knowledge and skills. What's your take on Samrat's situation, Guil?
Oh, yeah. First of all, as Alex mentioned, 21 is not a late start by any means. I, in fact, started a little later than 21, a little way back, and even just from recent experience, I've talked to a handful of Scrimba students who are well into their 40s and are just getting started, and you know, it's not late at all. And what happens when even at a later age, you're bringing lots of valuable transferable skills into this craft, and it's going to help you all in the long run. But to speak to being 21, and since your friends are a year and a half of experience in coding, you know, the industry kind of reinvents itself every 5 years or so. So you'll find that in 5 years, yeah, you're going to be completely almost relearning new things that your friends also have to relearn. So there'll be a point where you sort of catch up. But if you think you're too old, but you're still interested in getting started with coding, you know, time's going to pass anyways. A year and a half, 2 years, 3 years from now, you're going to be 5 years older and not know how to code. So might as well just take advantage of it and learn it now. And you'll be thankful that you did it, if it's something you want to do. And it's going to unlock lots of, you know, great opportunities for you in a year and a half or so. So yeah, don't be don't be down because you feel like you're getting a late start, because yeah, you know, my experience, it's hardly ever too late to start. So do it.
Completely agree. I liked your point there of if you want to do it, then it's only going to take longer if you don't start now. So yes, go for it. I hope that answers your question there, Samrat. Let's move on to another question I had in mind, which was why do distractions happen and how can we prevent them?
Yeah, I mean, I get distracted all the time, right? And we all do for various reasons, whether it's notifications from Discord, Slack, social media, text, Netflix. Maybe you're having technical issues that prevent you from moving forward, right? Some of the more external things, but there might be internal reasons or sources, like you're really tired, right? You're hungry, or you're simply not engaged with what you're learning. But all that, impacts and distractions do impact our ability to learn, and minimizing distractions is totally key. So, yeah, to answer the questions on maybe how to combat distractions, some things that have worked for me and some students that I've talked to even is if you have a planned and established routine, right? So, like I talked about earlier, it may be a routine that's similar to things you have now or in the past, like exercising, playing an instrument or a sport, or going to the gym, or even as a student in the school, right? You block off dedicated time that you're like, all right, this is my time for studying, and I'm going to commit to it and treat it like one of those events where, you can't just, like, if you're distracted, you just can't pick up and leave or check your phone if you're in the middle of running, for example. Like, maybe you do, but, but, and like I said, you might bring a to-do list also to keep you more focused and on track, so you avoid maybe getting distracted. But another thing that helps, if you can, have a dedicated sort of learning and study space, maybe something that you don't frequently use for things that can distract you, like, watching movies, surfing the web, or sleeping, eating, that sort of thing. Avoid a space that might suck you into unnecessary distractions, and will help you focus. And if none of that works, maybe you need to take more breaks. So pay attention to your distractions, and how many things might be distracting you and how you're feeling, because you might want to break up that session into smaller chunks, and even reward yourself later in between with distraction breaks, right? As you move through the learning.
Perfect. Brilliant. That brings me to my next point, which was, when I can find it, what do you do when you need to learn something which doesn't interest you? Because you mentioned one factor in distractions can be you're just not engaged with it. Sometimes in life, unfortunately, we have to learn things that aren't that interesting to us. How can we tackle that?
Yeah, if you're starting to learn something and you're not too keen on it, it just doesn't interest you. It might be because you don't yet understand it. And I know that was my situation, believe it or not, when learning to program. As a designer, at first, I was like, oh, code is scary. It's all a black box. It's not that interesting to me. But hopefully, once your understanding starts to increase, maybe you start to apply it in some ways, and even sharing what you've learned and created with colleagues, you'll get a little bit more excited about it. You'll find the subject more interesting. And also, maybe part of why learning in a community or alongside colleagues is valuable, because you might not be interested in something, but others in the group are. So you might reach out to them, and maybe in a group discussion, for example, understand why they are interested in something, and see it from their perspective. That might help. Also, listing out the reasons why you maybe need to learn this, right? And look for ways that you can put what you're learning into practical use for your benefit. So maybe, we were just having a discussion in the bootcamp with a student that they found recursion, right, in JavaScript super confusing, maybe not as interesting as engaging, but like, all right, so maybe if you learn about the details of recursion now, it's going to help you speak to or more effectively break down how certain algorithms work, for example. So, and if all else fails, you might just move on to something else, right, and revisit it later, as long as it doesn't derail your learning, and it makes sense. And maybe something later will kind of click and drive you back to that, and it might make you more enthusiastic and interested about learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. Might be that little kind of missing puzzle piece you need to help you understand and therefore enjoy the topic a bit more. And I think the main takeaway is don't be too hard on yourself if something is just a total bore for you. Like, it's fine. We can't all be interested in everything.
Yeah.
Maybe try something else for a bit. Yeah. Bob Zirol is here. Hi, Guil. Hi, everyone. Hello, Bob.
Bob, what's going on?
What is up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to what we were saying about ship it early and ship it often, Orange Coating is asking, do you think it's acceptable as a beginner to deliver a not 100% working as intended, but does sort of work, add some value project in a business?
Yeah, I think so. And you don't need to feel bad about it. Say, you ship something, it's not complete. It's working, and it's maybe some minimum viable thing uh, that you've worked on. But when you do that, maybe you frame it as a learning experience. Like, all right, I shipped this thing, but there's a lot left to it, and there's a lot of things I maybe have to learn to kind of make it the way it needs to be, and kind of frame it as a learning moment. And hopefully they'll provide some good resources, or maybe mentorship, or a more senior developer to kind of pair with and get it to where it needs to be. So yeah, as long as you don't try to hide it, like, you promised them all these things, but you didn't do it. It's just kind of this minimal thing, and use it more as a learning moment and frame it as a learning opportunity. I don't see why it's really going to be harmful towards you in your job, for example.
No, you see quite often on apps, it says such and such a feature coming soon, or it's in beta or something. So
yeah, it can be beta.
I don't think, oh, what? It's not completely finished. I'm not going to use this anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's totally fine. Good question, though. Thank
Yeah.
you. And we talked a bit about how to ask for feedback, and you gave us some great tips. I wanted to ask you how we can make the most of feedback when it's not so positive. You could call it criticism even. How can you use that to your advantage and not take it personally? Asking for a friend.
Yeah. I'll answer for a friend as well. But yeah, no, I get it. Criticism can be tough, right? Especially if you don't agree with it. You might sort of fall in love with the thing you're doing, and you put all this time into it and feel great about it, and then you get some criticism that just kind of strikes a nerve, right? Whenever that happens, first it's good to kind of take a pause, give yourself some space to process it. You don't want to lash out and say, I disagree with everything. But so when you give yourself some space, I think it gives you more an opportunity to think about the feedback or the criticism more objectively. So in terms of not taking it personally, we got to realize that it's often not, or it's backed by good intentions, right? And it's generally never a criticism or an attack on you specifically, or your skills, or meant to put you down or say that you're a terrible coder. Hopefully not, but that's generally not the case. So do the best you can to detach yourself from it, and frame it as like, okay, this is someone's subjective observations and their thoughts about this particular approach, and it's in some way going to help me grow as a developer or a student. And also, if you feel like the criticism is not specific, if it's super vague, follow up, ask for clarification, more specific examples. But yeah, hopefully it's something valid and constructive that's going to provide learning moments.
Totally. Just to be clear, it's not a work situation. My friend is asking for this. It's learning a skill outside of work. Yes, everyone at work is very nice. I'm good at giving feedback. Just have that on record. Yeah, that's a great point, though. The number of times I've had feedback or criticism in the workplace or outside, and maybe at first you think, oh no, how embarrassing, I've done all this wrong, or you feel hurt or whatever, as you said. But then a little bit later down the line, and you've worked on that criticism and improved what you're doing, you think, oh, I'm so glad that person told me, otherwise I'd still be doing it the old way. I think it's a bit like if you've got some toilet paper stuck on your shoe and nobody tells you, you don't want to get all the way home and it's still there, like, yes, it's embarrassing to be told, but it's better for you in the long run.
Absolutely. Great way to put it.
Yes. Brilliant. And going back to the perfectionism issue we had earlier, Veridity Moon says, in reference to that, anything worth doing is worth doing imperfectly. There we go. Very good advice, which I did not deliver very well, but I enjoyed it very much indeed. Anna says, great advice. I struggle with not taking criticism personally sometimes, but as the time passes, it gets better. Yeah, I feel you, Anna. I think that's most people probably suffer from that to some degree. But I think as long as criticism is helping you grow, although it's uncomfortable, it's going to be helpful in the long run. And if it's not the type of criticism that's helping you grow, then maybe you should tell them to go away. Yeah.
Worst case, you can always ignore it, right? And
yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Justice is wondering, how long will it take me to learn web development? How would you answer this question, Guil?
Yeah, it's generally, a lot of it is up to you and how you approach it. But let's take the Scrimba front-end developer career path, for example. I believe like the quickest I've seen someone go from 0 skills to getting hired is around 3 months, right? It might take a few days or weeks to go through HTML and CSS, and then you're going to spend a lot of time on JavaScript and React and building projects along the way. But if you apply, yourself just about every day, maybe weekdays, and you work towards getting better every day, progressing through the path specifically as you're showing there. Yeah, it's a bit of an anomaly, but I've seen students anywhere from 3 to 5 months like go from 0 to job ready and become professional developers. So it's really up to you. The more you put in, the more you're going to get out of it. And be really strategic in your learning and put a solid plan together and get involved as much as you can with the community, like I mentioned earlier, and expect that you're going to have to put in a lot of work outside of just watching videos, and you're going to have to follow up on maybe some supplemental resources and challenge yourself in ways outside of the platform you're learning on. But yeah, but don't be hard on yourself or put too much pressure on yourself if it's not happening in like 3, 4, 5, even 6 months. Like it varies, right? It could be a year, it could be a year and a half, but if you keep at it, I think good things are going to happen, and you're going to start to see results. But you have to be strategic, and you kind of have to have a plan and approach it in a serious way. You can't just haphazardly do it in many cases.
Yes. On the back of this, Guillermo has a question. Greetings from Guatemala. Greetings to you too. How can I learn if I don't have much time available?
Yeah. By the way, hey Guillermo, my name is Guillermo too, but so happy to see another Guillermo on here.
Good name.
Yeah, from Guatemala. Yeah. Part of that is it's hard, right? If you, let's say you work 8, 9 hours a day, and then you have a little bit of time when you get home to maybe do learning and studying. But it depends, right? So if you do have, let's say, towards the end of your day, anywhere from an hour to 30 minutes that you can dedicate, intently to learning and studying, if you take full advantage of those 30 minutes or that hour, several days a week, it's going to take a while, but if you're going to get somewhere, right, where you can then build upon that knowledge and start to build more meaningful projects over time, and it's not going to be 3, 4, 5 months, but take, as I mentioned, take advantage of the pockets of time that you might have. And if it's something you're really interested and keen on doing, then commit to those 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour a day, and you'll start seeing some results, right? If you haven't started it yet, I recommend, just blocking off 25, 30 minutes a day, if that's all you have, and you'll start seeing that you're going to check off a lot of the tasks on your learning list. You're going to start accumulating a good bit of knowledge over several weeks and months if you do that.
Lovely answer. Thank you. Yovi is wondering about when facing a task or a project, find themselves getting overwhelmed. They have a feeling that they have the knowledge to solve it, but struggling to start or plan their code ahead. Any tips for that moment when you feel like you're standing on the edge of the cliff and how do I dive into this code?
Yeah, totally. That blank slate moment. And that's part of what I was talking about earlier. If you're learning along, you're with the instructor, you're kind of doing everything they say and you're feeling great, but you get to a point where you have to do something on your own. That's when you're like under this shadow of uncertainty and you're it's a bit daunting and exhilarating for many. So whenever you're faced with that, just don't feel overwhelmed by the full scope of the project. If it's a big project, do your best, and even folks in the community, for example, can help you with that, to break it down into manageable bits, right? Like maybe tackle just writing the HTML navigation in the header, and then fill in the content. Okay, I'm feeling good about this. Maybe even have someone review it. They might even nudge you with more feedback on how to progress. From there, work on the next part, and then the next part. You might even write down your approach, right? Create a list or a doc with how you might approach this. And when you do that, you're not going to look at it as this, massive, overwhelming project. That it's going to be more manageable, is what I'm getting at. So lean on the community, lean on any sort of colleagues or you might have as well who've built similar projects too. If you're part of the Scrimba community in our module channels, for example, they're great at that, at helping students see the project and the big picture, but also how to break it down into manageable bits that work for them.
Lovely. I hope that helps Yofi. And you also, Eninaya, had a similar question about overwhelm, which I think shows that it's a very common feeling, which is why when you're working in a professional environment, they don't just come up to you and say, oh, yeah, you have to build Twitter today. Like, no, it's broken down. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, right? You're going to have your sort of Kanban board or your Trello board or Asana task list or Google issues, and everything's going to be broken down for you and scoped in a way that's manageable. The best way to approach a solo project is one of the good ways to do it, aside from what I just talked about, is to get a code review, right? If you've built part of a solo project, as I mentioned before, if you're feeling good about it in a way, it's in a state that you feel good about sharing it with folks, get it code review. We have this code review feature for our pro students if you're a part of that in our community. And take it from there. They're incredibly valuable. Students help and support each other so much in that channel. And yeah, I've seen some projects go from like, I'm not feeling so good about this approach to like something outstanding that they themselves couldn't believe they put together after getting code reviews. And instructors are there like myself and folks from the boot camp, and some of our vetted code reviewers are there from time to time, as well as just peers from the community. Super helpful.
That's right. I've just dropped the link to Scrimba's Discord into the chat, so come along if you're not already there and ask for a code review. I hope that helps you out there. Let's move on to the next question I had in mind. Very thought-provoking. Peter is asking, how do I get interested in learning again after a tragic occurrence? Sorry to hear that, Peter. I'm sure it's something that many of us can relate to. Do you have any tips for Peter here, Guil?
Yeah, I think in that case, if we're talking about getting interested in learning again in coding, so getting back into it, it depends. I'm sorry to hear that you've had a tragic occurrence. I don't know exactly what it was, but I think in those cases, it might help to find maybe a colleague, an accountability partner, maybe a mentor in some ways, be part of a community that can, help kind of ramp you up, if you will, get you back in and sort of ignite that interest again. I know it did it for me. Like I can't tell you how many times like I've just had community group discussions or just been a part of some sort of cohort based lesson and just things that I might not be motivated if I was doing by myself or interested in, but just being part of a group, right? That really sparked the energy and the motivation to kind of keep me going. So if you can, being part of learning communities, it's super important. And I think it is going to help boost your learning if you can do that. I'd recommend it.
Perfect. Hope that helps you out, Peter. Christine is wondering whether you've got any tips on writing more organized code. Christine tried finding resources on this topic, didn't have any luck.
Yeah, resources specifically, none come sort of off the top of my head, but I'd say as a student, for example, just taking it back to the community, getting a code review. Getting a code review helps so much. Like I said, there might be it might be that right you wrote your code, but you know that it needs some refactoring. And hey, as part of seeking feedback, say, look, I'm feeling really good about this, but I think I need some help with code organization, and maybe I need to refactor some of these messy functions. Or uh, can anyone have a look and tell me what they think? How would they do it? Yeah, when you do that, you'll be surprised by a lot of the responses and feedback you get. Also, yeah, check out some GitHub repos. There's a lot of open source projects out there. People post the code base to the things they're working on Twitter all the time, and just have a look at how they do it. And that's going to give you some good ideas. And depending on what it is you're looking for, you can leverage like Chrome Dev Tools and see kind of how sites are built. I did that a lot. It helped me with learning front end code and some pro sort of best practices. Yeah, lots of approaches you might take, but in terms of like specific resources, I can maybe gather some up, maybe send them over to Leanne or post them in the comments.
Yes, I'll tweet them. But yeah, it sounds like having a look at other repos is the best way forward. Nice. And asking for feedback once again. Nayawira is wondering, how do you choose what to focus on or become in tech, given all the different fields and everything? How can you narrow it down? Any advice on that?
Yeah, it sort of depends. I say kind of lean towards what interests you most. Like I said, maybe if things don't interest you at first, maybe because you don't understand them. But so yeah, try a bunch of different things. But I think in terms of getting down to the basics, I think Scrimba's front end developer path is a good place to start and give you kind of a big picture idea of how to get started with code and some of the foundational bits of coding and building for the web. And then from there, you can take your learning anywhere from not specifically on Scrimba yet, but you can learn backend development, machine learning. Maybe you can dive into Python and learn programming that way. Yeah, I think early on you can kind of try your hand at several different things, but yeah, I do recommend the standard sort of HTML, CSS, and some programming language first. To kind of get a taste for it and a feel for if it's even something you're interested in and want to continue doing, because it is going to be challenging, and then take it from there. Just don't overwhelm yourself and feel like you need to learn everything and all things at the beginning, because yeah, it might kind of have the opposite effect.
Right on. Similar kind of line of questioning. Demarcus is wondering, what do you recommend if you're interested in front-end development, also want to learn SQL? Is there a best order to go in? Interesting question, because a lot of people want to earn both back-end, front-end, and any other amount of different things. Does it really matter which way around you learn them?
I would say, I say it does. If you do have a solid understanding of front-end development, how to, for example, call an API and use that information. And I think you're going to have a better understanding of like when you get into SQL and how databases work and relational databases, and then how to build APIs using that with Node, for example, and interacting with a SQL database from the server, for example. So yeah, I think learning front-end web development will better set you up to maybe grasp SQL and working with SQL with something like Node or ORMs, object relational mappers, for example. I think it'll do you some good to understand front-end web development prior to diving into SQL, if you're interested in doing like full stack development, for example.
Lovely. Hope that helps you on your way to Marcus, and best of luck for your journey. Jake is asking, any tips on how to leave good comments for yourself and others when coding? Sometimes I read my own comments, I don't even remember what I mean. I think we've all been there. I know I certainly have. How can you make sure you write good quality comments that don't cause that problem?
Yeah, good question. It depends. Be clear, be specific, right? Don't leave line upon lines of comments. and you might even run some comments by another student or a colleague, and make sure it's clear, and that they can kind of understand what you communicated that the code is doing. So yeah, I recommend kind of running it by someone else before you kind of commit it to GitHub, for example, or turn it in. But yeah, keep it brief. Brevity is beautiful.
It is. You may be interested, Jake, in our Introduction to Clean Code course, which mentions clean comments, among other things. Can have a little look at that if you think it would be useful.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. I wanted to ask you, Guil, about self-esteem and how it affects learning. What have you observed in your years of teaching on that front?
Yeah, in some ways it does affect your motivation to learn, and maybe the ability to learn something new and complex. Everyone really grasps things differently. Some are faster, and for some it takes a little longer. But if you are, for example, feeling down on yourself, if you do have low self-esteem for not quite understanding something you're learning, or you feel like, oh, others are getting it more easily, but I'm not, that might start to kind of kick off this thing where you feel stuck, and then you feel overwhelmed, and maybe you're not cut out for this. So, and feeling that way is normal. Gosh, I felt like that way a lot in my learning. But when you do that, you tend to hit a wall, or maybe this big obstacle that you need to overcome. And then if you do that and start to feel a lack of progress, productivity, and motivation, that's often what might lead to sort of giving up. And even what might exacerbate that feeling is if you're learning alone. So at least for me, instead of feeling isolated and having this sort of daunting feeling, especially if I'm stuck, I recommend addressing that by being part of, like, as I mentioned, a learning community. Like we do at Scrimba, right? We have an amazing, vibrant, supportive group on Discord. You get unbelievable help, support, and feedback. And then when you're with these sort of like-minded students, you'll notice and even be relieved in some way that, oh, that they're asking the same questions and having the same hurdles that I'm having. And you'll find that, hey, maybe someone else had the same issue and the same feeling. And then they can provide you support and help you get unstuck. And then you can do that for someone else. And because there's a good chance that, like, you're going to know something that they don't know. So by being supportive, answering questions, however simple, yeah, I think that's going to boost your confidence and overall self-esteem and learning experience in ways you didn't think, and totally, hopefully, keep you going.
Lovely advice there. And Sakila also says, always tell yourself you don't understand it yet. Simple way of telling yourself eventually you will get it. Yes,
Indeed.
very nice advice there. And on the topic of taking care of yourself, I suppose, programmer Laura says, how to maintain mental health in this industry. I literally do not have a life anymore. Lol. Oh dear, sorry to hear that, Laura. Burnout is a very common thing. How would you advise Laura in this case, Guil?
Yeah, that's can definitely be a thing. And embrace, if you do have the opportunity to take breaks for however long, maybe, that if you're starting to feel burnout or approaching burnout, maybe you never experienced burnout and you don't really know the symptoms. But I think, your body might let you know when it's time to kind of take a break and completely disconnect, and in some ways purposely distract yourself away from work. I know it's easier said than done. For some, it's a little bit more difficult with their jobs and what they have going on. But for me, it's all about being deliberate about how I take my breaks and when. I know that, oh, if I work this much for this long, I kind of tend to feel burnt out at these sort of periods. So I with that in mind, I kind of plan for when to take a break or disconnect. That's kind of what's worked for me.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Another related question. Frost Drive. Do you ever get headaches or brain fog at work? I have to keep working. How do you deal with that? That's what I'm afraid of experiencing. In life, I guess there are sometimes times where you do have to power through. Do you have any advice on how you can deal with a situation like Frostdrive is describing?
Brain fog. So that's when you kind of in this, oh my goodness, blank state moment, don't know where to start sort of thing.
I think so. Or could also be just
Motivation.
feel like you've woken up with your head under the pillow and not had enough oxygen all night, so
Yeah.
you're
No,
drowsy.
totally. Yeah, I think, and something I've tried, even when not just with coding, with content creation. Some days you wake up and you're like, oh, maybe I can't get started, or you feel like you're very sluggish. Just the act of doing something will maybe inspire some kind of motivation to take more action and keep going, and then from there, uh, you'll hopefully continue to make some progress through the day. So what what works for me is to simply just take action. If let's say I'm writing code, or doing a code review, or writing for a course, I'll just begin writing, or just take some kind of action. It could be messy, it could be ugly, and then after a while, what happens is like, oh, I see this. It's a good start, but I need to improve this or refactor that, and then so that then triggers the next thing I need to do, which is to make it better, and then I go from there. So just the act of just doing something for me, like I said, triggers and sparks some kind of motivation and action that I can continue doing. That hopefully that carries me through that brain fog moment.
Yeah, they quite often say, don't they, that the
Hmm.
hardest part is
Hmm.
starting, and then
Yeah.
once you're
So
doing it, it's not
just
so
get
bad.
started.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Mhm.
We've talked quite a lot on this stream about a community and learning together. And I also said at the beginning, mentioned that you are the leader of the Scrimba Bootcamp.
Yeah.
Here it is. What can you tell us about the Scrimba Bootcamp and how it's been for you so far leading the bootcamp?
Yeah, it's been exciting. So the boot camp, as Leanne has up here, it is our basically it's our front end developer career path for Scrimba, and it offers students a more immersive and even sort of a communal learning experience. So when you joined, you're a part of this dedicated study group of like-minded folks, and you keep each other on track, and also practice accountability within the group, talking about your goals, your challenges, your wins. And we do that weekly uh, through these teacher-led sessions, and that's where we get together with other boot camp students. And there's a lot of connections that sort of developed, and even projects that have spun out of these sessions that students are working on the side for themselves, for more learning opportunities, which has been magnificent. And a big part of the boot camp is also code reviews. So you get this high value code review from a vetted and experienced coder, and you get it rather quickly, right? We turn them around in about 24 hours or less, and you get a follow-up code review as well if you have any outstanding questions or want to touch upon some things that the reviewer suggested, or any feedback they gave. And when you're ready for it, when you reach the sort of job search phase of the path, we'll have some career advice sessions where you get your portfolio, your resume, maybe your LinkedIn profile reviewed as well by someone on the team. So lots of good things happening in the boot camp. It's been great. It's been about a little over a couple of months now that we've been open, I would say, and our students come from a wide range of backgrounds of all ages, and really the goal is to meet the student where they are in life currently, and provide a lot of the support that they need, and the structure that they need to ensure that they succeed at learning and become hireable developers.
Lovely. So that is the Scrimba Bootcamp. If
Yeah.
it sounds like it's up your street, head on over to scrimba.com/bootcamp to find out more. And of course, if you do sign up, you'll be in weekly meetings with Guil here. So,
I will see you there. Yeah, it's exciting.
Totally. One question which kind of puzzled me when I wrote it, even though it was my own question, was, how do you know when you've actually learned something and you can move
Ooh,
on to the next topic?
yeah. Well, for me, when you can teach it, that'll do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, part of it is if you can teach something to someone, uh, certainly that helps reinforce and sort of validate your learning, or maybe just being able to explain something to a friend and they sort of get it. But for many, if you can quickly retrieve that information and use it without having to sort of dig back to your resources to brush up on high level details, uh, that is an indication that what you learn is stored in your long term memory. So that's a good sign. But with that said, as we've talked about a little bit here, you're not expected to have to remember everything either. So that's what your notes are for, and Google, Stack Overflow. You're always going to rely on those resources. But also, if you actually learn the knowledge, whatever it might be, you can be way more productive too when you do lean on Google or Stack Overflow. I mean, who doesn't, right? But what I'm saying is that you can more easily find a solution, understand the code, and better adapt it to the solution, to the problem you're trying to solve, for example. So it maybe won't feel so much as cheating, which you shouldn't feel like anyways. But what I'm getting at is when you know something well, you can do a lot of it without intense effort. So that's going to free up uh, a lot of time or mental capacity for you to pay attention to more advanced details and even sort of build upon what you already learned.
Brilliant. On this, Eunice has asked a question which ties in very well. For a developer who took a long break off, roughly 2 years, from coding, diving back into coding, grabbing the coding skills can be very challenging. Any tips and advice to face this, please?
Yeah. So in the bootcamp, for example, we've had a couple of students who, in fact, many of them have been just there. They've attempted to code. They were at it for a little bit, maybe got frustrated, discouraged, and gave up. And after some time, are coming back into it. So the good news is that you might already have a head start, right? So uh, maybe things might have changed a little bit since you last left, but yeah, really tried. I don't recommend leaving off, starting where you left off. I still recommend going back and reviewing sort of what you think you already know, what and sort of gauge where you're at. And if you have the capacity to, okay, maybe I got this. I still get it, and then that might sort of fast track your learning into the next big thing you have to maybe take on. So, yeah, just I recommend starting over and just kind of using that as a measuring stick, if you will, of okay, where you might need to go from here, if that makes sense. And also
Totally.
lean on the community. We have folks that kind of help people kind of on ramp back in the boot camp, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it because, well, best case scenario, you remember everything about
Mhm,
the stuff you've already learnt and away you go, and it won't take you long to go back over it.
mhm.
Or perhaps you've forgotten some things, in which case it still probably won't take you as long to go back over it, but at least you'll know that you've got that foundation. Well, the other thing that might have happened is some things have changed. So, for example, there was a bunch of new CSS properties that came out, I think, last year.
Mhm.
Something like that might have happened. So it's still worth, even if you have retained all your knowledge, going back over it, because even people who have been here either learning or working as developers over the last 2 years, they're having to learn that stuff as well. So you're
Yeah.
not really at too much of a disadvantage because we're
Yeah,
always all learning. So
that's a great point. You'll find that you're going to be learning something or starting to learn something that, someone who's been at it for much longer is also just learning because it's something that's been changed or introduced or updated, for example. So, yeah, good point.
brilliant. A final question from Sherry. Would you still believe in taking notes with a pencil and a piece of paper? That's the way I've learned and taught my children and grandchildren, they later say. Well, earlier on, Sherry, Guil showed us his notebook. I believe it was a pen, but yes, in summary, that's
Indeed.
totally the way to go.
Yeah.
there was, I just said one more question, but there was one I can't resist bringing up. Is it okay to search the answer from Google while learning? Says Positive Comrade. And then Veridity Moon says it's not okay to Google while coding. 80% of coding is Googling. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. In fact, even some of the projects that you build on Scrimba, like part of it is Googling to find answers or solutions to some of the problems you need to solve. So long as you don't just copy and paste and move on to the next thing, just aim to understand what you're copying, and challenge it, test any sort of assumption, console.log, whatever you can, and when you feel like you got it, move on.
Totally. Yes. Anyone who says they code without Googling, I worry about these people. Honestly, I do. So, yes. Tarun is asking me, will Scrimba introduce a backend course in the future? Yes, but we don't know when.
Yes.
Lovely. Well, that is all we have time for. That's been a very informative session. Thank you so much for joining, Guil. It was lovely to talk to you.
Yeah.
Very much enjoyed it.
Absolutely. It's wonderful having me.
If you would like to see more interviews with experts like this one, hit the old subscribe button and perhaps leave a comment of who you would like me to talk to next. Always open to ideas. And next week, I've been looking forward to this one for a while. You may know the website /blog HTML Hell. It's a collection of terrible HTML, basically. This is the, oh, here you go. Yes, here it is. Manuel, who runs this blog and Twitter page, is coming next week to tell us all how to not write bad HTML. So I hope you will enjoy that. And before then, Michael and I will be coding flashcards, hopefully with good HTML. But I'll let you know after the following one. In any case, yes, I hope you come along. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And if you didn't, I can't imagine why you wouldn't have, but let us know and we'll do something differently next time. Yes, brilliant. Any closing thoughts, Guil?
No, yeah, when you're learning to code, it's challenging. Be patient, as we've said. Don't be hard on yourself. Sometimes when learning, have fun with it. Do your best to establish a learning routine. The more you do it, the more things are going to start to click. And it's going to be this sort of powerful feeling that you get, and that can unlock many life-changing opportunities for you.
Absolutely. I second that wholeheartedly. Right. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and catch you all next time.
See you, everyone.